folks, Miguel Iturrate back here on the MMA Museum podcast, and we're into another one of our classic fight segments. I've got my sidekick and protege, Kirk Spitz, here with us, and we're going to look at a classic fight from back in the old days. And I've got a couple of reasons for choosing this one. So one that's very short and sweet. We're going to look at Vitor Belfort and his debut fight. It went down in Superbrawl way back when. It was 1996, I believe it was October of 96, October 11th, 1996. And he took on UFC veteran John Hess. Like I said, short and sweet. So we're going to have to talk a little bit about it before and talk a little bit about it afterwards to get the whole video together. But what you're about to see is definitely history, the debut of Vitor Belfort. Kirk, what do you remember about Vitor? I remember actually the first fight that we went to live was Vitor against Tank, right? What was your impressions of Vitor from the very beginning?
Yeah, we went down and we saw Vitor against Tank, and that was pretty epic. I remember when we saw Vitor, we knew he was all business. Because I mean he was jacked and he was just, super fast. And he was the next big thing. I feel like he was kind of coming up with, you have your pioneers, and then he was kind of in that second grouping with the Mark Kerrs and the Colemans and the, Vitor Belfort grouping. It was just always an exciting fighter and a good fighter, always kept himself well. I know there was, things here and there, rumors here and there about different things that you could probably talk better on, like age and, where was he in the whole juicing process? Was he not?
Yeah, yeah.
But
Now,
what
when
I
he
don't
came,
know is I
God,
don't know too much about John Hess.
no
So
one
if you
does.
want to just give me a little bit of history on him, I think he only had one other fight.
Yeah, so here's the deal with, first of all, Vitor Belfort, the fight we're about to see on Superbrawl. This is Superbrawl 2. He was Vitor Gracie, and the announcement, the ring announcements and everything like that. So he was fully using the Gracie name, not a member of the Gracie family, but under Carlson Gracie's tutelage. Gracie obviously saw what he had there and wanted him, marketed as close as possible and stay on top of that. Eventually, obviously, they broke up, and Vitor's mom managed him and things like that. But yeah, and he became Vitor Belfort in public, but he was actually Vitor Gracie and then became Belfort Gracie for a little while, and then just fought as Vitor Belfort. He had a very, very long career. Back here at the start, the word was he was 18 years old. There were rumors that he was maybe a little older, that there was some shenanigans there with, maybe a fake passport or maybe just lying about his age. I don't know details on that. Maybe it's not accurate, but there were definitely those rumors around that time. And the fact is, you look at what you're about to see. This doesn't look like an 18-year-old boy or man, even an 18-year-old,
Mhm.
very young man. It looks like a little more mature, maybe in his early 20s. I'm not saying he was, old, but lying about a few years helps athletes at some point, and he may have taken a little bit of advantage of that. As we get into the video, you're going to see one of the interesting things. This was Superbrawl 2. This is TJ Thompson's promotion, and TJ was one of those guys, an early guy that knew how to market the sport, and he sold DVDs and actually sold his DVD franchise for good money later on. This fight was not part of his DVDs. When you bought the Superbrawl 2 DVD, you did not get the Vitor Belfort or Vitor Gracie debut. Vitor had managed to get, through the contract or whatever, exclusivity or his rights to the fight, and it was never released as part of the Superbrawl DVD. So if you brought Superbrawl 2's DVD, this fight is not on it. And that's why we're going to look at a really poor quality of tape here, because these are actual tapes that were made from the audience. There are a few of them out there, a few different angles and things like that are out there on this fight. But yeah, that's a little bit of the bells and whistles. Now, as for John Hess has represented the martial art of SAFTA. Not a lot of other SAFTA representatives out there. He fought in the
What is
UFC.
SAFTA?
I forget exactly what it stands for. We can look it up, and I'll put it in the notes in the comments here when we post the video. But he fought Andy Anderson in the UFC in a match that included a classic double knee drop. He beat Andy Anderson, but but got himself banned from the UFC because he was a cheater. He poked Andy Anderson in the eyes. Andy Anderson was partially blinded after the fight. And Art Davie was never going to have John Hess back. So it looks like he waited about a year, a little over a year, sat out, not getting to fight, and then finally said, okay, I'll sign with Superbrawl and go and warm up this Gracie kid. He was arrogant. He was not a nice guy as far as the persona that we saw in his interviews and stuff. And, I'm sure that he thought he was going to work over a young Vitor Belfort or young Vitor Gracie. It wasn't the case. Like I said, what we're going to watch here is painfully short, but definitely a classic.
John Hess, SAFTA.
Yeah.
Scientifically aggressive fighting technology of America.
There you go. There you go. Like I said, there's not
scientifically aggressive.
It's not like you're.
That gives me the warm fuzzies.
Yeah, no, that's very much, 90s talk.
Yes.
Yes,
it's absolutely
like it's not like if you look at the drastic difference right now, Carlson Gracie, who was a master of Vitor Belfort and his opponent, there are Gracie jiu-jitsu schools all over the world. The same didn't happen for SAFTA.
No, I guess not. I guess not. Well, you got to remember Joe Sando.
Joe Sando is another one of those.
Was it Joe Sando or Sando or something like that?
Yeah,
he was just making stuff up.
Joe Sando. I think that you're right on that. So definitely, we're back in the early times. John Hess coming back to fighting here, and I think he was.
Did he ever play football?
I don't know. Very little is known about him. He was a big guy. I think he was about 6'8". In terms of you could tell he's taller than Belfort by a lot. And he was arrogant to the point where I'm sure he thought SAFTA was going to be big, and I'm sure he thought that he was here to win this fight, and they would go on, to be the next UFC champion. He had that level of arrogance when we got the brief view of him in the UFC. So without much further ado, let's watch this fight, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. Okay. So we're going to go 3, 2, 1, play. And you can see it's a video from the crowd. This is not shot by TJ and his cameraman. The ref, famous Superbrawl ref, he's, known for letting the fights go a little bit, and we'll see what happens here. So there's some of that scientific aggressiveness as he charges across the ring.
He looks scientific.
Yeah. Belfort got the body lock, got him down, and, softened him up.
He's just too fast. I think he's dead there.
Yeah, no, his head's up.
He lifts his head up like,
he lifts his head up. And we didn't get a seizure. We
didn't know.
But I think we were close.
Like that. Here's one thing you need. I don't even know. Did we get blood?
No.
Blood?
Yeah, I think he looked clean there, but it's hard to say. But we never saw John Hess again. So after this, maybe he was embarrassed, or maybe he realized that SAFTA wasn't the scientific art that you go into fights with. But
so much for SAFTA.
Belfort went on to come to the UFC. Like you said, we mentioned the Tank fight. The Tank fight was kind of similar, in that when Belfort started landing, he's just got to the point where he was trying to unleash a flurry of huge punches. He fought Scott Ferozzo. He did the same thing against big men, John Hess, Ferozzo, Tank. You're talking about all guys, 260
and above. But then he ran into his first loss against Randy Couture.
Yeah,
that was because Randy was able to take punches, and then I guess threw more of the wrestling on him.
Well, Randy did the dirty boxing on him, which clinched up on him and just outworked him. So Randy started hitting him first and never let up, kind of thing. But Belfort was a good front runner at the very beginning of his career. Obviously, he had a huge, long career, and has become an icon, deservedly so. But in the early days, he liked to run people over and get out of there fast. He also did the same to Vanderlei Silva in Brazil, where he came out, landed a few punches. Vanderlei, started, backing up, and he kind of backed up in a straight line, and Vitor just chased him and finished him up against the fence. Again, flurry of punches, fast punches, like you said, very fast. He was just an impressive athlete. So after you saw this fight,
he did that against Tank too, right?
At the end, Tank was getting hit. He was on his
He
stomach,
just
and
covered up.
yeah, he
He
was
just
on his
kind of gave him
stomach. He
his
was covered,
back, right?
and he was kind of looking around. Like Tank was a guy who could take some shots. He was kind of looking around like there's nothing he can do, but he's just getting hit. He wasn't out, not
Well,
like this.
he was mad after that fight
Well,
because
yeah,
if you remember,
yes, and
after the fight,
that is the
after the
famous.
fight, you and I had tickets to do the whole show and to go and hang out with the fighters afterwards. It was like in the early days, so they were still doing that.
Yeah,
So we
they
had
were
bought the
doing an after
package.
fight party in a conference room in the hotel. The hotel brought in a guy with a wheeled little bar to sell beer and alcohol and stuff, which is probably not a great idea with Tank around. And Tank and Eddie Ruiz and Paul Herrera, Tito to a certain extent, although Tito at that point was kind of smart, wasn't around for the big, you know, brawl kind of thing. But they went after Waleed Ismail and Carlos Barreto and the Belfort camp, and that fight ended up with Coleman in the middle screaming, "Come on, I'll fight any one of you." And then,
I remember hearing something, looking over my shoulder and watching Tank go flying onto a buffet table like something out of a movie. And then I think we bailed. I think a glass came towards you and broke by the wall by you. And that's when you and I were like, we gotta go. So we went out, and I remember watching the whole thing on the other end of that convention hall, whatever, with Maurice Smith, and
yeah,
we were just talking about it the whole time, and
Maurice
that was a lot of fun.
Maurice was a character who wasn't going to be uptight in that situation. So he was cracking jokes and stuff. And Tank got cold cocked by Waleed Ismail is how it started. That Waleed drove by, kind of did a drive by and floored him with a punch. And that's
Was
about.
Al Stanky there?
Yep, Al Stanky was a boxing guy that was Vitor Belfort's um, boxing coach, and
Isn't that what started it?
Tank had done some work with him, and that's one of the instigating factors there. I think alcohol was another instigating factor. I think Tank's natural way of handling himself, and in a competition in the octagon with refs and stuff, I think he does better in the street kind of thing,
Well,
especially
Tank's
back in those old days. So I think he was looking to extend and maybe a little payback, but definitely some
well,
history there.
yeah, Tank's camp that night was probably pretty fired up anyway, because Tank lost to Vitor and thought that it could have went on. So he was a little bit upset about that stoppage. But that was also Tito came out, beat the snot out of Wes Albritton, and then lost to Trey Telligman.
No,
Or
it was
no,
Guy
Guy
Mesger.
Mesger.
Yeah, it was Mesger.
And
He lost to him
but
with a
everyone
guillotine,
thought Mesger tapped in that fight.
and yeah, Mesger also had him in sort of a weird choke that Tito wasn't comfortable with. They had a rematch later, and the whole Lions Den Tito Ortiz rivalry was actually born that day. You're right. You're right. That was that. Tito wasn't happy. Also, another memory from that day is that Art David kind of lined up the fighters and paid everybody with an envelope, if you remember. And Tito didn't get an envelope because he was a college wrestler on a scholarship and fought for free as an amateur. So in
Oh,
order to keep his scholarship, so Tito was around there. He was also having some beers, but Tito was not part of the huge altercation that happened later on in the evening. So
no.
yeah, very interesting. And that's Vitor Belfort's story. Vitor Belfort's debut. He went on into the UFC and then, went on to a long and storied career. Um, you know, Probably destined for the Hall of Fame at this point. What was your last memory of Vitor?
Um, it's just I don't have anything like that really stands out. I mean, the loss to Couture, because you thought that he was unstoppable at that point. So it was almost like when I saw Maurice Smith stop Mark Coleman. I was just couldn't believe it. It was that kind of a fight when I saw that against Randy against Vitor. It was just like, wow, I thought that Vitor would own him because he was just so young and so fast and well trained. But so that's probably a big standout fight for me. And then I mean, as you went on, you had the Machida fight was I guess his last fight, right?
Well, I'm not sure if it was his last fight. It was his last maybe UFC fight. He caught a kick to the face and got knocked out.
You know,
Um,
and after seeing that, you kind of like that's when you start going like, I hope he retires soon. You know, I liked him. I hope, you know, because he's coming off of Souza and Masasi, and you know, he had to win against Marquette and then loses against Machida, and you kind of see the writing on the wall, you know, as
yeah,
they get
once he
older.
got off the TRT too, his body softened and changed, and you know, he was a little bit of a different competitor there as well. So,
What do you think
yeah.
was his best fight? What was your favorite fight of his that he won? Something that showed you his heart.
See, that's it. That was always a question with him. He was a good front runner, and so the fight I think that was the most telling about him is when he lost, and that was the fight that gave us the legend of Sakuraba in Pride. So he goes to Pride to fight Sakuraba, who at that point, you know, maybe had beaten up some smaller Gracies. I'm not even sure exactly in the timeline, but he wasn't the legend he was gonna be. He wasn't totally proven yet, and a lot of people, if you remember, he was in the UFC, lost to Conan, protested, and they made Conan rematch him in the UFC during the first time the UFC went to Japan. So Sakuraba established himself to me with the Vitor fight, and Vitor went out on a shield there because he got his ass kicked, and you know, he stayed in that fight. So that to me is the most memorable Vitor moment. Also the Vanderlei moment, because Vitor had left the hotel and had his mother renegotiate with the UFC, and it was questionable whether he was even going to fight because people were saying he was scared. And then he came out and walked all over Vanderlei, and you know, Vanderlei went on to become a legend afterwards. So that one may be the best win that I think he had in the early days. And then to me, the most famous Vitor fight is still the Sakuraba fight.
Okay.
All right, so we have just watched Vitor Belfort's debut. It happened on Superbrawl way back in 1996. So we are in the early days, and that's a wrap here at the MMA Museum.
All right, cool deal. Thanks, Miguel.